Hello everyone and welcome to this lecture. My name is Burhanuddin and in this lecture we are going to learn about SQLite Database. Okay, so let's just first talk about SQLite Database. That what is actually the SQLite Database, okay? So SQLite is an open source SQL database that stores the data to a text file on a device. Android comes in built-in SQLite database main implementations, so we do not need to externally call any database or anything like that. So SQLite is basically very helpful when we need to create a database file just specifically to the user's device, and we do not need if we don't want to extend the data of the user onto the server or anything like that. So yeah, SQLite database is very helpful in that scenarios. Okay, so without further ado, let's just open the Android Studio and create a new project. Select the empty activity and click on next. Now let's just name my application as database demo. Click on finish and let's just wait until the Gradles are built successfully. So as my Gradles are built successfully now let's just hold the control key and click on this activity underline main in order to open our XML file. Let's just close this project pane and switch to the split view. Okay, so as usual, let's just first open a whiteboard and design our layout. Just move this thing aside. Okay, so what we want in this UI is I want to edit text right at the top and 1 and 2. We actually want to create an application which can store the computer name and the type of the computer it is. So we are going to actually build that up, and after this edit text, I want two buttons below it. And below this button, I actually want a list view. Now this list view will contain all the data that is stored inside my database. So let's just add the functionalities of these buttons, that what this button will do. So the first one, this will be used to add data inside the database, and this will be used to delete the data inside the database. And this will be a list view. And the first edit text will say computer name, and the second one will say computer type. And this two will be of edit text. Okay, so let's just switch back to the Android Studio and let's just create our layout. Let's just remove this text view from here, and let's just change this constraint layout to list view. Sorry, linear layout. Okay, so now let's just first change the orientation of the layout, because we know that by default the orientation of the linear layout will be horizontal. So let's just change it to vertical. Okay, so now what we want to edit text, so let's just drop them right here. The first one will be for the computer name. Let's change the text color to black, and let's just increase the text size. At 18 sp. Let's just add some padding inside this root layout. Okay, that's fine. And let's just assign an ID. I will call it EDT computer name. So let's just duplicate this edit text. Let's change the hint value to from computer name to computer type. And let's just change the ID as well. Okay. So now what we want is two buttons. And if you notice that these two buttons right here are placed next to each other. So we can use, if we have used the relative layout instead of the linear layout, we can place them easily. But as we are using the linear layout, let's just put another linear layout inside this linear layout and specify the orientation of that linear layout to be horizontal, and then we can put the buttons next to each other. And we can also specify the layout weight attribute, so that they to make sure that those two buttons takes the equal proportion of the screen size. Okay, so let's just do that. Linear layout width will be match parent and height will be wrap content. Let's just close this. Now let's just add two buttons. Now as we are going to use the layout weight attribute, we need to make sure that the layout width should be wrap content. Now if this depends on the orientation of the root layout. Basically, as the root layout for this button is currently this linear layout, and the orientation of this linear layout will be horizontal, so the layout width will be dependent on the orientation of the root layout. That is, if the orientation of the root layout is horizontal and I want to use the layout weight attribute, then it will change the layout width based on the layout width. And if the root layout's orientation is vertical, then the layout width attribute will change its width, its height. Okay, so now, okay, so let me explain you. If I want, let me open my whiteboard. If the layout, if the root layout's orientation is horizontal, then the layout weight attribute will change the width of the button. Okay, and if the orientation of the root layout is vertical, then the layout weight attribute will change the height of the button. Okay, so that's the case with the layout weight attribute. So now let's just keep the layout width to be wrap content. And one more thing, if I want the layouts width to be changed, then with the help of layout weight attribute, then I want the layout width attribute to be of wrap content. And if I want to change the layout height based on the layout weight attribute, then I want the layout height to be of wrap content. Okay, it cannot be match parent. Okay, remember that. Otherwise it won't work. So now let's just put the layout width to be wrap content. Oops, right here. And layout height to be 40 dp. Let me increase a little bit. Let's just add the text. It will be add, and that's fine. Let's just add layout weight. Let's just assign the value 1, and as you can see, it has already matched the parent. It is, or we can say, it has already matched the width of the parent or root layout, while the layout width is still the wrap content. Let's just assign an ID to this. I will say btn add, and that's it. Now let's just duplicate this thing. Okay, so now as you can see, we have two buttons sharing the equal proportion of the screen size next to each other. Now let's just change the ID to btn delete, and I will say delete instead of add. Okay, so that's look good. Now all we want, if we take a look back to our layout, now all we want is a list view at the bottom. Okay, so let's just get out of this linear layout, and I will say list view, width will be match parent and height will be match parent. As you can see, here is our list view. Now you need to know one thing, that if you are using a list view, then you do not need to provide a scroll view to scroll the values inside the list, because the list view already contains that feature. Okay, so remember that thing. Now let's just assign an ID to this list view. I'll say ID to be list view. Okay, and let's just close this. Now let's just run our application and see whether it is working perfectly or not. So as you can see, our application is up and running. Here are two edit text of our, and here is the add button and delete button, and at the bottom here is the list view, but it is not showing me right now because there are no elements inside the list view. Okay, so let's just switch back to the main activity and write our Java logic. So first of all, let's just instantiate our variables that we have declared inside our XML file. Okay, so let's just do it right here. So I'll say private, or let's just say edit text. Add computer name. Or let's just say EDT computer name. And the second one was EDT computer type. Okay, so let's just declare our buttons. There were btn add and btn delete. Okay, so let's just also declare our list view. And let's just say list view. Okay, now let's just instantiate them. Okay, so now right now that was it for our main activity. Now we want to create a Java class which can hold the value of these computer objects. So let's just do that. So for that I will open the project pane and I will click on this package folder. I'll right click on this package folder and then go to new and create a Java class. So I will name this class as computer. Click on enter and this will create a new Java class for me. Okay, so now this computer.java class will hold the data of my objects that will be created. Okay, so now let's just specify the variables right here. So I will say private as the access modifier for these variables. Okay, because we know that as we have learned earlier that our variable name should be private, and if you want to access the data of that variable later on, then we can do them using the getters and setters. Okay, so this is a good practice to by keeping the variables that holds the data of your objects to be private. Okay, because using getters and setters you can actually put a timestamp to know that at what time, and we can actually put a label that specifying that by which class the data was modified of that particular variable. So they are very useful in that cases. So the first one will be of ID and it will be of integer type. The next one will be of computer name and the third one will be of computer type, and the both one will be of string. Okay, so now let's just define some constructor of our class. So let's just say the first for this particular example we will be requiring three constructor. The first one will be the empty constructor. The second one will be the constructor having three parameters containing the ID, computer name and computer type. And the third one will be consisting of two parameters consisting only computer name and computer type. Okay. So any class that wants to create the object of this computer class will be able to create an object without specifying an argument or with specifying an ID, and of course without specifying an ID. Okay. So let's just create our first constructor. So remember one thing, that the name of the constructor must be same as the name of our class. So I will say public computer. And it will not take any parameters. Now this thing is showing me an error, and if I hover to this error, this it says that invalid method declaration, return type required. Okay, so the reason behind this is it actually inherits to the super class. So we can specify that super and now the error is gone. Okay. Now let's just create another constructor which will be carrying three parameters, that is ID, computer name and computer type. Now I will assign this the value of this variable to this variable that I have declared inside my class. So for that I will use the this keyword. Now this keyword is very useful as it points to the variable of my current class. Okay, or we can say that it points to the instance of a class. So I can say this dot ID equals to ID. Now when I am saying this dot ID equals to ID, with this ID I am actually referring to this ID that I am passing in the parameters, and with this with saying this.id, I am actually referring to this id that I have declared inside of my class. Okay, so I will do the same thing for computer name and computer type. So now let's just define our third constructor, which will be carrying two parameters of computer name and computer type. Now let's just assign the values to our local variables also, like same as we have done in this constructor. Now, as of we have created our constructor, now let's just create the getters and setters method for our variables in order to access them outside of this class. So, the simplest way of doing that is hold the Alt key on your keyboard and press the Insert key, and then from this menu, you can choose the getters and setters and select all the variables and click on OK. And it will automatically generate the getters and setters for you. Now, if you don't know about the getters and setters, let me explain it to you quickly that if I want to access the value of this ID, I can use this getID method and it will return the value of ID for me. And if I want to set a value to this ID variable, I can use this setID method and it will set the value of ID for me. So I can use this thing in the code like this. So I can say this dot ID dot get ID. I can use this method like this, and for setting the ID I can say set ID. Okay, so in this way I can set and get the value of the ID. Okay, and it will do the same thing for the next two for other two variables as well. Okay, so we are done for this computer class. Now we need to create another class, and that class will help us to manage our database. Okay, so let's just create one more Java class and we will call it SQLite Handler. So as the name suggests, the SQLite Handler class will help us to manage the operations on our database. So let's just name it SQLite Handler. Now, in order to make this class work, we need to extend it to SQLite Helper class. So let's just do that. I'll say extends SQLite Helper. Make sure you have S, Q and L in capital, and then Lite and H will be in capital, and we will use SQLite Open Helper class. Now it is showing me an error because we need to implement some methods. Okay, so let's just do that, but first let's just define some variables. Okay, now let me open my whiteboard first. let's just put this thing aside. Okay. So if you are familiar with SQL database, then how does the structure of the database looks like? Okay, it is simply like having a big database file like this. Okay, and inside this file what we have is a bunch of tables. Okay, so inside this file we have a number of tables like this. Okay, so we will have multiple tables like this. Now, what the special thing about these tables is this table will have a particular name. Okay, so inside the database, the first thing that we have is a database name. Okay, and the second thing that we have is a table name. The next thing we have inside our database will be inside our tables. Okay, so inside our tables what we will have, that the table will be consisting of rows and columns. So for the columns we have column name. And other than column name, what we have now, each value in a column or in a table will be identified with the help of a primary key. Okay, and these all things these are the things that we need to define inside our database, and this thing will be defined inside our SQLite handler class. Okay, so let me just define them one by one to get you a better idea about it. So the first thing we will define is the version of the database. Now, why do we need the version of the database? So for example, if I have created a database with some values or some attributes, that is the column names at the first, okay, but later on in the future I needed more columns with the same data of the same database. So what can I do is, instead of deleting that database and creating a new database from the scratch, if I do that, what will happen? The data inside the database will be gone. I can deploy a new version of the database with the new version name, and what will it do? It will delete the old database, but instead it will give me a new database with old values. Okay, so that's why version is very important. So let's just define that first. So I will adding the comments as I will be doing code to give you a better understanding of what we are doing. So I will say database version, and let's just specify that. Now remember one thing, that we are doing this thing only once, so this will be work as a constant, and the syntax that we follow while defining a constant is keeping the name capital. So remember to make to follow that thing. So I will say, as this thing is a constant, I will say private static. We need to follow a certain naming conventions, and we are just doing that because it makes our code better to read, and it is a healthy practice to do that because in bigger companies or any companies which work with Java follow these naming conventions. So it is very helpful for you to practice in these naming conventions to give you a better understanding and help you in writing better code. Okay, so I will say private static final integer, and I will write in capitals that the database version. Okay, so we can define that database underscore version, and the first version of our database will be 1. Now here I cannot write 1.0 because my because the type of this database version variable is integer that I have defined. If I want to define 1.0, then I have to define float here. Okay, so remember one thing if you want to do that. So the next thing it will be database name. So let's just say the name of the database to be computer DB. Okay, so I will say private static final string database name and to be computer DB. Okay, so the next thing we want to define is the name of the table. So let's just say the table name to be computers. So now let's just define the columns inside this computer table. Okay, so basically there will be 3 columns. The first one will be for ID, the second one will be for computer name, and the third one will be for computer type. Now, as we have defined the version of our database, the name of our database, the table which we want to create inside our database, and the columns that will our table contain. And now the next thing is to write a query. Okay, so basically we use SQL. So basically we use SQL queries inside our SQL to write the CRUD operations inside our database. So basically what the CRUD operations are what are the CRUD operations is CRUD operation consists of create, read, update and delete. Okay, so in order to perform this operation we basically use the SQL commands. Okay, So let's just write, so what we'll do is write an SQL command to create a table and we will store that command inside a string variable, and later on whenever we want to use that SQL command we can just refer to that string variable. Okay, so let's just do that. So I will say string create computer table. Now here we need to write the command for creating the computer table. So if you are familiar with the SQL commands, this will be very easy for you, but if not, then don't worry, I am here for you. So let's just type create table in order to create a table. Okay, now after this command we need to give this a table name. So basically what the command is create table name, and then we will specify the columns inside that table with the primary key and stuff. Okay, so now let's just do that. So we have already written create table, and the next thing that we need to provide is the table name. So if we look at this variable that we have created, the name of the table is consist inside the table computer. So we will just refer to that variable right here. So I can say plus, I'm using the plus sign in order to append two strings. Okay, so I will say table computer. Okay, now what we need to do is to specify the columns inside this table, and we can do that inside the parentheses. So I'll say, let me just add some spaces here. Okay, so let's just put a parenthesis here. Now we will specify the columns inside our table. So the first column will be of column ID. So let's just refer to that variable, column ID. Now the next thing we need to specify is the type of this column. Okay, that what kind of data will this column store. Now ID will be in integer format, so I will set the type of this column to be integer. So I will say and as I want the column ID to be primary key, so I will define it right here. Now let's just put the comma here. So the next column inside our computer table will be of computer name. So let's just refer to that variable right here. So I will say append computer column computer name, and this will be of text type. So this I can say this will hold the values of text type. So I can say text and a comma and a space, and the last one will be for column computer type. Okay, so I can say column computer type, and this will be of text, hold the data for the text also. So I can say text, and I don't need to specify the comma because this is my last column, and space here, or I cannot provide the space, it will be okay too. So now let's just close this parenthesis and put the semicolon at the end. Now I can use this string variable in order to create a table. Okay. So now first thing we need to do in order to remove this error is to implement a constructor of this SQLite handler class inside which we will create a database. So the next thing that we need to do is to create a constructor for this MySQLite handler class. So let's just create it. Now this constructor will be carrying one parameter and it will be of context type. Now it is giving me an error and it is saying me that we need to insert a super method. Okay, so let's just do that, and this super class will be consisting of 3 parameters. So let me show you by typing it. So if I type super and create the parentheses, now as you can see that it is showing me that we need to pass 3 arguments right here. So the first one will be the object of the context, and the second one will be the string name and it will be the name of our database. Okay, and the third one will be of context cursor factory. Now what is cursor factory? So cursor factory is basically used for returning the subclasses of a cursor whenever we are calling a query. But as we don't want to do that in this application, we can put that thing to null. And the fourth argument that we need to pass is of the version of the database. Okay, so we have all the variables declared above, so we just need to pass them right here. So the first thing that I need to pass is the context object, and the next thing will be database name. We'll pass null for the cursor factory and database version, and put the semicolon at the end. Okay, so now after creating this constructor, we need to actually implement 2 methods, and those 2 methods are on create and on upgrade. Okay, on create method will be executed when we will call this SQLite handler constructor, or we can say when we will create the object of this SQLite handler class, and the on upgrade method will be created whenever we update our application. Okay, so remember I told you that if we want to create a new version of our database, for that purpose we use database version. So that creation of new database will take place inside this on upgrade method. Okay, so let's just first create our first method, that is on create method. So I will say on create Now, in onCreate method, we basically want to create our database. So for that, I can say db.execute SQL, and then I can pass my create database, create computer table query inside it. Okay, so I will say db. Now this db, I am referring this db from the SQLite database variable that I am getting from this onCreate method as a parameter argument. Okay, so I can say db dot execute SQL, and here I can pass my SQL query of string type. So we have already written it, so I can just pass this create computer table here. So I can say create computer table, okay, and this will create a computer table inside my database for me, okay. So the second method that we need to implement is on upgrade. So let's just do that. Okay. As you can see, this method comes with 3 parameters as an argument. The first one will be of SQLite database, and the second one is of old version of the database. That is, if you look at our current situation, our current version will be 1, and the new version, if we update our application, the new version will be 2. So in this method, we actually don't need this method. We actually don't need to apply logic for this method with the current application that we are going to create. But this method is compulsory to implement. That is why we have implemented this method. But as we have implemented this method, I want to show you that how we can drop the table and replace it with the new table. Okay, so let me just write the logic for you. So I will use this db variable that I am getting in the parameter, and then I will say db.execute SQL, that is db.exec SQL, and the query will be drop table if exist, and I will pass the table name. So I can say drop table if exist, and then I will pass the table name. Now what will this method do, or this command do, is to it will delete the old database table for me. Now as my table is deleted, I want to create a new table. So I can just simply call the onCreate method and pass the db variable inside it as an argument. Okay, so I can just simply say onCreate and pass the db variable as an argument. So this line of code will delete the or we can say drop the table for me, and this line of code will create a new table for me. Now after creating this, now we will create our operations that are crude operations here. Okay, so let me add a comment. So we are going to create so remember one thing, crude stands for create. Let me write it down so you can note it if you want. Create, read, update, and delete. This is a term used repeatedly in industry, so it is important for you to know certain terms in the when you are doing Android programming. Okay, so now let's just create them one by one. Now let's just first write the logic for create operation on our database. Okay, so I will say create operation. So let's just create a method which will help us to add a new value inside our database. So I will call this method add computer. So let me type it out. public, and the return type of this method will be void, as I don't want to return anything. And then add computer, and this method will take one parameter as an argument, and it will be of type of computer class, and it will be of basically a computer class object type. So I can say computer, and I will create an object of this computer class. So now we can specify our logic inside this method. The reason for behind creating the object of the computer class is we have already defined the three variables that are the three columns which our table have. Okay, so in order to use the value of these three variables, we are creating an object of computer type. Now what we need to do is to get the writable database from our SQLite database. Okay, and to do that I will say SQLite database. I will create a object of a SQLite database. So I will say SQLite database. I will name it as database, and I will say this in order to refer to the current class, and I will say this dot get writable database. So basically there are two methods available that we can use. The first one is get readable database, and the second one is get writable database. So we can use get writable database whenever we want to write something inside our database, and we can use get readable database whenever we want to only read data from our database and not to write inside our database. Okay. So for this method, if we want to add data inside our database, I will use get writable database. Now the next thing that I want to do, I need to do is to create a variable for the content values in order to store the old values inside one array like thing, I can say. So I will say content values. I will say content values. I will use the new keyword in order to create an object of content values. Semicolon at the end. Now the reason behind explaining these things so deeply is every time you will be working with SQLite database, this thing will remain same. Okay, so there will not be any changes in these queries. So you have to do the same things repeatedly. So that is why I am explaining these things very deeply. So now I will use this content values object in order to put the values inside the data inside the columns of my table. So I can say values of content values dot, I will use put method. So I can say dot put, and then the first thing that I want to put is the computer name. So I can use column computer name, that is the name of the column of computer name. And then I will get the value from the computer object with the help of the object of the computer class that we have created. So I will say computer, and remember that we have getters and setters inside our computer object. So I will use the getter method for the computer name in order to get the values from the computer object. So I can say get computer name, and then I will do the same thing for the computer type. Now we do not need to specify the ID because the value of the ID will be auto generated. So now let's just insert this thing inside our database. So in order to insert these values inside our database, we have a method called insert. So we will use SQLite database object, that is database, and I will say dot insert. And as you can see, this insert method takes three things as an argument, and the first thing is the table name, and the second name is null column hack. So what is this null column hack? So sometimes what happens that we want to insert an empty row inside our table. In that case, the content value should contain null. Okay, in that case, content value should not contain any value. So we should in that case we can define we can use null column hack. For example, if we want to insert an empty row inside our table, okay, so for example, we have a table with name student, okay, and we have two parameters inside it of ID and name, where ID is an auto generated and name should be null, as we want to insert a empty row. So we can write it like this. I can say database dot insert, the first argument will be of my table name, that will be student, and the second one will be for null column hack. Now null column hack means what value I want to put inside the inside the row that I want to specify as null. So I basically so it means that no value will be provided inside the content value inside the content values for that particular column. So I can provide a null or garbage value right here with the help of null column hack. So I can just specify name, okay, and I can just specify the content values later on. But if we don't want to use the null column hack right here, so we can just simply specify it as null. And let's just change the table name, as our table name is table computer. Okay, so let's just close this database. Don't forget to close the database after operation. Okay, so that was how we can perform a create operation on our database. Now we will see that how we can read a single data from our database. Okay, so for that, let me just enter a comment first. I will say getting single computer object or read. Okay, so let's just create another method for it. So I will say public, and for the return type I will use the computer class, okay, because this method will return three things, that is ID, computer name and computer type. So I can just simply use the computer class. So I will say computer. So this method will basically return an object of computer type, and then let's just name this method as get computer. And this method will take one thing. Remember I told you that in this table of mine I want the ID to be the primary key. So I can just simply use the ID in order to identify each row uniquely. So I can say integer ID. Now let's just write our code here. So the first thing that we need to do is create an object of SQLite database. So let's just do that. And this time, if we don't want to write anything inside the database, we can use get readable database method. Okay, so I will say this dot get readable database. Now we need to create, in order to read the data from the database, we need to create an object of a cursor interface. Okay, so let's just create the object of the cursor interface. Basically, cursor is an interface that provides random read and write access to the result set written by a database query. So by using the this cursor interface, we can query data from the database. So let's just create an object of an interface, cursor interface. So let's just say cursor, and I will use this SQLite database object in order to create the object of the cursor interface. I will say actually we need to access a method of the cursor interface. So I can say database dot, and the method name is query. Now we need to pass certain arguments inside this method. So the first thing that we will need to pass in the argument will be of table name. So that table name is stored in table computer. So I can pass table computer right here. Okay. So for the second argument, I need to pass a string array containing the columns inside the table. So I will say, in order to create a new string array, I will use the new keyword. So I will say new string array, and then I can pass the elements inside this. So I can open the curly brace, and then I will say the name of the columns. So the first one will be column ID, then column computer name, and then column computer type. Notice one thing, that I am keeping the sequence of the column same as I have kept before. Okay, so don't misplace that sequence. Okay, so now for the third argument, I need to pass, as you can see, I need to pass a string selection. Now what is a string selection? So basically string selection is a where clause. So we can say that this where clause, that is string selection, will determine how we can actually want to get the data from the database. For example, here we will provide column ID. Let me just type it out. So I will say column ID, and then I will append equals to question mark. So this means that we want to get a specific data related to this specific column ID. Okay, so let me just break it down to the next line. Now as a fourth argument, we need to provide a string array specifying the arguments for this where clause. Okay, but as we have only one argument specifying this where clause, we can just say a string, or in order to create a new string array, I will say new string array, and then I will say, now if the ID is of integer type, we need to parse it or we need to convert it to the string type. So for doing that, I will say string dot value of, and in the parameter I will use my integer variable. So I can say string dot value of, and then I can say I will pass the variable name right here. So it will be ID. Now as I am saying ID, I am referring to this variable that I am passing into the parameter. Okay, and now for the last three arguments, we have three categorizing things that are group by, having, and order by. But as for this application, we don't want to use them, so I can just simply specify null value for them. So I can just say null, comma, null. So that was it for this cursor interface. So now all we need to do is to fetch the data from this cursor object. Okay, so I can say that first we need to check that if there is any data inside our database. So I can say that if cursor interface object, that is cursor, is not equals to null, that is if it contains some value, then do this, that is cursor dot move to first method. Okay, so this method will return the first object that it will found on that specific column ID. Now we have got the data from our database, but we need to at the end we need to return that data in the computer in the form of a computer object. So now let's just do that. So first, before returning the data, we need to create an object of a computer class. So let's just create it first. So I will say computer, then computer equals to new computer Now, while creating the object of this computer class, we will be using the constructor of a computer class having three parameters. That is this one, which consists of ID, computer name, and computer type. Okay, because we want to get a specific value based on the specific ID from the database. So we actually need to again pass that ID value from string to integer type. So I can say that integer.parseInt and this will pass the value from string to integer for me. So I can get the value which will be in the first position of the cursor interface object. So I can say cursor dot get string at position 0. Now, as a second argument, I will do this for computer name, and as a third argument, I will be doing this for computer type. Now we can just simply refer this computer or return this computer object. So I will say return computer. So in this way we can get the single data from the database. Now we will write our logic in order to get all the data from the database. Okay, so let me just add some space here. And now we will be writing our logic for getting all computer objects. Now we need to keep one thing in mind here, that as we will be returning multiple values we cannot returning using a single object. Okay, so we need to combine multiple objects inside one thing. So we can do this with the help of list. So what we can do is create a list of a computer type, and then we can return all the computer objects inside that list. Okay, so let me just create a method in order to give you a better understanding of what I am saying. Now as a return type, I will be using list, and this list will be of computer type. Okay, so in this way we are creating a custom list, if you want to say. And let me just name my method as get all computers. So I will say get all computers. Okay, so now let's just first instantiate this list. Now as we know that list is an interface, so we can not directly create an object of this interface. So in order to create the object of this interface, we need to use another class which implements this interface, and that class is ArrayList. So we can use it like this. Let me type it out. List of computer type. Let me create a object with name computer, and then I will say new array list. Now all we need to do is write a query which will select all the values from our database. So let me create a string variable for that, and we will say this string variable as select all query. Now in order to select every element, we have a wildcard character which says star or asterisk, you can say. So we can write that select star select star from a table name. In our case it will be table computer. So I will say select star from table computer. Now again, in order to read the data, let's just create the object of SQLite database with the get readable database method. Now again we need to create the object of cursor interface, but this time we do not need to pass this much data inside the constructor inside the dot, but this time we do not need to pass but this time we will not use the dot query method. Instead we will be using the dot row query method. Okay, so let's just do it right here. So I'll say cursor. I will use SQLite database object dot row query. And as you can see, we need to pass two arguments right here, and the first one will be the query that we want to execute, and the second one will be the selection array string and selection argument string array. Now this argument string array is of where clause that we have discussed earlier for selecting a particular or a specific value from the database, but as we want to use this method to fetch all the data from the database, we can put this thing as null. So I will pass the query first, that is select all query, and for the second argument I can just simply say null. Okay. Now what we will do is to put a while loop. So we will run a while loop until there is some data inside our database. But first we need to check that whether our database contain any data or not. So for that I can simply use an if condition. So I can say if cursor dot move to the first. If cursor can move to the first element, then we will run a while loop, do while loop actually. So I'll say do, I'll first create a computer object. Now this time while creating a computer object, I will use the constructor without any parameters. Remember that we have also defined one constructor without any parameters. Okay, so we will use this constructor in order to create the object of this computer class. So I will say computer equals to new computer semicolon at the end. Now using the getters and setters, we are going to set the values of the objects. Okay, so I will say computer dot set id. Now again we need to parse the id from string to integer type. So I will say integer dot parseInt, and then I will get the value of id from the 0 index position. So I can say cursor dot get string 0. Okay, so we will do the same thing for the computer name and computer type. So I'll say computer dot set id, set computer name. It will be in the first position of a cursor. So I'll say cursor object dot get string at position 1. And I will do same for the second index position. So I'll say computer dot set computer type at index cursor object dot get string at index 2. Now all we need to do is to add this data to the computer list that we have created. So I can say computer computers dot add computer. So this will add all the values of my computer object into the list. And after this I will define the while condition. Here I will specify that do this thing while there are more position or more data inside the database. So for that I will say cursor dot move to next. So I am specifying that while the cursor is able to move to the next position inside the database, you have to do this thing. Now after this condition, I need to specify the return statement that this method will return an object of type computer and it will be of list. So I will simply return this computer's list here. So I can just simply say return computers. So in this way we can get all the objects inside our database, or all the data inside our database. So the next thing that we'll do is to write a logic specifying how we can update a single or a particular value residing inside our database. Okay, so let's just do it. So let me add a comment first. Update a single computer object. So let's just create a method for it. So I will say public now this method is going to return the ID on the, specifying the space position where the values has been updated. So I will set the return type to be of integer, and then I will say the method name is update computer. Now this method will carry one parameter as an argument and it will be a object of computer type. So I will say or a computer class. So I will say computer and computer again. Okay. So now let's just create an object of SQLite database. Now if we want to update a value inside our database, we will be using get writable database method. Okay. Now we need to actually do the same thing that we have done while adding a single value. So we will again create a object of content values. Now we will put the values inside it. The first one will be for column computer name. Fetch it from computer class using the getter method. Now let's just do it for computer type. Now the thing we need to do right here is to update these values to a particular position inside our database. So we need to actually pass the where clause right here, that I want to put this value inside this particular position inside my database, specifying a particular ID. Okay, so I can do this with inside of the return statement. So I can say return, I will use this database object, and then I will use the dot update method. Here in the arguments I need to specify 4 things. Okay, so the first thing will be the table name, the second thing will be the values that I want to update, and the third thing will be the where clause, and the fifth thing will be the arguments for the fourth thing will be the argument for of that where clause. So I can just simply say table name has to be table computer, the values as the content values, and where clause will be the column ID because it is my primary key. And I will append it with the with equals to question mark. And as a fourth argument, I will specify the ID from ID of the position. I will specify the value of the ID where I want to update the data, and I will get it from the computer class. Okay, from the variable of the computer class. So let me just create a new string array. So for creating a new string array, I will use the new keyword which says string, and then I will say as the value will be in integer format, so we need to convert it into the string type. So I will say string dot value of and in this case it will be residing inside the computer object. So I will say computer dot get ID. So computer dot get ID method will get the ID value of ID. Okay, so let's just put the semicolon at the end right here. Okay, so yeah, that was it for updating a single value of single computer object. In this way you can update a value of single computer object. Okay, so now we will see how we can delete a value of a single computer object. So let me just add a comment deleting a single computer object. Now let's just create a method for this, and similarly for as we have done for the add computer object, this method will also not return anything. So I can use void as a return statement. So I can say private or public. I can say public void delete computer, and this method will be consisting of one argument as a parameter, and it will be of a computer object. So I can say computer okay. So first thing we need to do is create the object of the SQLite database class, and as we need to modify the database, we need to get the we need to use the get writable database method. Okay, and let's just do it first. SQLite database, I will create the object with name database equals to, I will refer to this class, this dot get writable database. Now we will use the delete method in order to delete a value at a particular position. So I can say database dot delete. Now I need to specify three arguments as a parameter of this delete method, and the first one will be the name of the table. The second one will be the where clause, that is from where I want to delete a value. Okay, so I need to specify that, and the third one will be the arguments of for that where clause. So in this case, in this scenario, the where clause will be the column ID. Now this line of code will delete a value at a particular at the specific column ID for me, and after performing the delete operation, always remember to close the database object. Okay, so I will say database dot close. Now in this way we can delete the values inside our database at a specific position. Okay, so the next thing we will do is to write a code for getting all the number of objects that we have, that is the total count of computer objects that we have inside our list. Okay, so for that let me just add a comment. So I'll say getting numbers of computer, let's just create a method. Now this method is actually going to return me the counts, that is the total number of objects that I have inside my inside my database. So that count will be of integer type, so I have to specify the return type to be of integer. Okay, so this method will not consist of any parameters, so let's just add a logic. So first let's just create a string consisting of a query that we need to run in order to create in order to get the total number of or total count of values inside our database. So I will name the string at computer count query. And the query will be select star from the table name. Okay, so let me just write it down right here. Now we need to create the object of the SQLite database class, so let's just do that and get the getWritable database method. Now we'll create the object of the cursor interface, and we will again use that row query method that we have used earlier inside this inside this method, where we were getting all the computer objects. Okay, the first thing will be the query, and it is stored inside the computer count query, and the next thing will be the where clause. So I will specify null for this, semicolon at the end, and again let's just close this cursor. And finally we need to return the total number of count, so we can get that using the get count method, and as the total all the values will be stored inside the object of the cursor interface, so we can use that object and say that return cursor.getCount. So in this way we can get the total number of count of the computer object inside our database. So I guess this was it for the total number of operations that we have for this application inside our SQLite handler class. So now let's just move back to our main activity .java file and let's just implement our logic here. Okay, so now let me just first declare some variables, as we need to declare a list, array list, and then the object of this my SQLite handler class, and of course an array adapter in order to set the list view to an array list. Okay, so let me just do them one by one. First I will create a list. I'll declare a list of computer type. Let's just call it as all computers. Now let's just declare a array list. And if this will be of string type. Let's just name it as a computer name. And let's just create the object of SQLite handler class. I will call it database handler. And finally let's just create an object of array adapter class. Now let me just instantiate some of these variables first. So I will first instantiate this SQLite handler class variable. So I will say database handler equals to new SQLite handler and I will pass the context as main activity.this. Now the next thing is let's just instantiate this list object, that is all computer, but as list is an interface, we need something to a class to in order to create the object of list. So we'll use the database handler object. So I will say all computers equals to database handler dot get all computer. So as you can see, I am actually calling the get all computer method that we have created inside the database SQLite handler class. That is this one. So you are actually calling that method. Okay. So now let's just instantiate our array list. So I will say computer name equals to new array list. Okay. Now in order to put the values inside this computer name, what I need to do is the first thing I need to check is whether there is any value inside the database. Okay, so for that I will use this all computer list. So I can say that if all computers dot size is greater than 0, then I can run a for loop. So I'll say for integer I equals to 0, while I is less than all computers dot size do I plus plus. And inside this for loop I can create the object of the computer class equals to all computer dot get at index I, and I will say computer name. Now after getting all the objects, I will simply add those values inside the computer name array list. So I can say computer's name dot add. I will use dot add method. I will use add method, and I will get the computer name from the computer object dot using dot get computer name method. That is the getter method for computer name. And the next thing will be of computer type. So I will just append this thing right here. Let me just put an hyphen in order to separate that. And then I will say computer dot get computer type. Now after this if condition, I will just simply set the adapter for this. So I can say adapter equals to new array adapter, and I will pass the context and I will pass the parameter. As you can see, the things that we need to the first thing that we need to pass in the parameter is an argument of context. So I can say I can simply pass the context as this class. So I can say this, and the next thing I need to pass is the layout resource. So for that we can use the simple list item that is available inside the android.r.layout. So I can say android.r dot layout dot simple list item 1. This one. Okay, so for the last argument I will pass the values that I want to set inside the array adapter. So I can say computer name and I will just simply set the this adapter to the list view. So I can just simply say list view dot set adapter and pass this adapter object inside it. Okay, so this is it, I guess. Yeah, so the last thing that we need to do is implement the logic for that two button of add and delete. Okay, so let's just do it. So I'll say btn add dot set on click listener new on click listener, and I will say let's just create on adding for adding new value inside the database, we need to create the new object of the computer class. So let's just create the new object of the computer class right here. So I will say computer equals to new computer, and we are going to use the constructor with the two parameters. So I will say the value of the computer name will be inside the EDT computer name, and the computer type will be inside EDT computer type. So I will say, but first I need to check one thing, that those values should not be empty. Okay, I need to check that the values inside this edit text must not be an empty value. Otherwise it will cause my application to crash. Okay, so let's just check that condition first. So I can say right here that if edt computer name dot get text dot toString dot matches to an empty value, or I am using logical or, edt computer type dot get text dot toString dot matches empty value, then you just have to simply return. Okay, so after when we specify this return, this means it will not execute the lines of code below this. Okay, so now we can add the values inside this parameter of the computer constructor. So I can say edt computer name dot get text dot toString and again edt computer type dot get text dot toString. And semicolon at the end. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do is simply add these values inside the array list, that is all computers. Using add method, I will simply pass the computer object right here and put the semicolon at the end. And I will simply use the database handler object, and I will simply add these values inside the database using the add computer method that we have created inside the SQLite handler class. So I will say add computer and pass the object of the computer class that we have created with the name computer. Okay, so we also need to do one thing, that we also need to add this thing inside this computer name array list. So let's just do that also. So I will say computer name dot add. Now we will get the value using the getter method. So I will say computer dot get computer name, and for the computer type I will say computer dot get computer type. I will append this with an hyphen to separate this. And I will simply put the semicolon at the end. And the one thing that I want is if the values are added, I want the this to edit text to be cleared. Okay, so let's just do it right here. So I will say edt computer type dot set text to null, and I want the same thing for the computer name. Okay, so that was it. And the last thing that we need to do is to apply the notify dataset change listener to this, so that whenever we add a new value inside this list, that value gets updated in real time in the list. Okay, so I will use the adapter object. So I will say adapter dot notify on data set changed, and that is it. Okay, and that is it. Okay, so now let's just implement the on click listener for the btn delete. So I'll say btn delete dot set on click listener. I'll say new on click listener, and I will write my logic here. So I will simply say that whenever the delete button is clicked, delete the first element that is inside the list. Okay, so that is the element that is at the 0th index of the list. Okay, so I'll say if first let me check that if there are any elements inside the list or not. So I will say if all computer name or all computers dot size is greater than 0, then do this thing. I'll say I have to remove the element from the from 3 list here. Okay, from the computer's name, from the database, and from the all computers. So I will say computer name dot remove from 0, dot remove at index 0. Then from the database I will say database handler dot delete computer. I will use delete computer method that we have created, and index will be all computers dot get at 0. And lastly from the all computers, so I'll say all computers dot we will use remove method. So I'll say remove at 0 indexed and put the semicolon at the end. And again we need to add the adapter dot notify dataset change listener to it. Okay, now let's just specify what to do if there are no data inside the database. So I can say else and simply return. Okay, so I guess that was it. Yeah, so now let's just run our application and see whether it is working or not. So as you can see, here is our list, and if I click on this button, nothing is happening because we have specified that you just have to return if there are no values inserted inside the edit text. So now let's just try and add some values inside the edit text. So I will say iMac, and this is type macOS. Let me just click on add button, and as you can see that iMac and macOS, that is the computer name and type, is now added inside my list. Now let's just enter another thing. So let me just say HP, and it is of Windows OS. So now let me just click on add, and now as you can see HP is also added. Let me just add few more values. Let me just say Dell and say Windows, and as you can now see it is again added inside my list. Now let me just try to delete one of these, and as you can see, as I click on delete, the value at the 0th position is getting deleted from my list. And now in this way you can store data inside the user's device. So now if I exit the application right now, and if I reopen the application, now as you can see the data is still inside the list. So if I delete this value from right here, so it should not be in the list again. Yeah, as you can see right here. So I can delete all this value, and I can close the application and open the application. As you can see, there is nothing inside the list, and I can again add some values inside it. I will say SR, and it is of Windows. And if I click on add, now SR Windows is added to my list. And if I close the application, let me just remove it completely from the memory. and if I reopen the application, as you can see, the SR Windows is still inside my list. Okay, so in this way you can use the SQLite database inside your application. We have also created many more methods inside our SQLite handler class, but that was to just show you that how we can write queries for different operations. So yeah, that was it for this lecture, and see you in the next video.